Galork adjusted the environmental controls of his exosuit for the fifth time in as many minutes. The atmospheric composition on this planet was within tolerable parameters, barely, but the humidity was wreaking havoc on his respiratory membranes. He'd known Earth would be challenging, all Class 4 Deathworlds were. What he hadn't anticipated was how thoroughly uncomfortable every moment would be. Temperature regulation still malfunctioning? Science Officer Tazir inquired, her voice tinny through the communications system. Functioning within parameters, Glork replied, the formal phrasing of his species failing to convey his discomfort. Though I find myself questioning the wisdom of this expedition with increasing frequency. The research vessel Empirical Discovery had been orbiting Earth for nearly 2 standard cycles. The Prontelex Science Academy had finally approved their long-delayed research mission to study what many xenobiologists considered the most fascinating anomaly in the charted galaxy: humans. These bipedal creatures had developed technological civilization on a planet that, by all reasonable standards, should have extinguished complex life eons ago. Earth was a swirling cauldron of meteorological violence, tectonic instability, and biological warfare, yet somehow humans not only survived, but thrived. The subject approaches, Tazir noted, her forward optical sensors contracting slightly. Galoric turned to see their local guide emerging from the tree line. Michael Tanaka moved with the casual confidence that continued to astonish the Prontelex scientists. The human wore only a thin layer of artificial fiber, clothing, they called it, exposing large areas of skin directly to the environment. No protective membrane, no filtration apparatus, not even rudimentary radiation shielding. "Morning, folks," Michael called out, raising a hand in what Galork had learned was a greeting gesture. "Ready for day 3 of your wilderness adventure?" Galork's translator rendered the humans' bizarre vocalizations into comprehensible language, though the informal manner continued to puzzle him. He responded with appropriate formality. "Wilderness Guide Tanaka, we are adequately prepared for continued scientific observation." Michael smiled, displaying his omnivorous dental arrangement in what Galork knew was meant to be friendly rather than threatening. "Just Michael is fine, or Mike if you're feeling friendly." The human approached their camp with that distinctive gait, a rolling heel-toe movement that somehow conserved energy while covering ground with remarkable efficiency. Galork had spent 3 academic cycles studying human biomechanics, yet seeing it in person remained disconcerting. "I thought we'd head up to Crawford Ridge today," Michael continued, pulling out a primitive data display device. A paper map, they called it. "There's a storm system moving in tomorrow, so this is our best chance to see the valley ecosystem." "A storm?" Tazir's vocal sac pulsed with concern. "Your meteorological disturbances were not in our scheduled observational parameters." Michael's expression shifted, eyebrows rising, head tilting slightly. "It's just a thunderstorm. Nothing serious. Might get a little wet, see some lightning. It'll be fun." Fun. Another human concept Galork struggled to comprehend. Environmental threat conditions being categorized as recreational experiences. "Our atmospheric interface shields may experience disruption in electrical storm conditions," Galork stated. "Perhaps an alternative observational route would be prudent." Michael shrugged, that peculiar human gesture indicating casual dismissal of concern. "Sure, we can stick to the lower trails if you want, but you'd miss the high-altitude biodiversity that makes this preserve famous." Glork felt the familiar conflict between scientific curiosity and self-preservation. The expedition-led, Professor Vakor, had emphasized repeatedly that their mission was of historic importance. The first comprehensive biological survey of Earth by non-human scientists would secure their place in academic archives for generations. "We will proceed as recommended," Glork decided, his secondary heart fluttering with apprehension. "Science Officer Tazir, ensure all sample collection equipment is configured for variable pressure conditions." The team of 5 Prontelex scientists gathered their equipment, each encased in environmental suits that cost more than most interstellar vessels. The Empirical Discovery remained in orbit, monitoring their vital signs and ready to extract them if conditions became untenable. Michael watched them with that peculiar expression Galork had come to recognize as bemused patience. The human secured a small fabric container to his back, a backpack containing what seemed to Galork a woefully inadequate supply of survival equipment. Just water, some trail mix, first aid kit, and a weather radio, Michael had explained on their first day, when Galork inquired about his emergency provisions. As if that were sufficient to survive on a planet where nearly 70% of the surface was covered in corrosive dihydrogen monoxide. As they began their ascent along the forest trail, Michael walked alongside Galork. The human moved with such casual ease over the uneven terrain that Galork found it almost insulting. "So I've been meaning to ask," Michael said, stepping over a fallen tree trunk without breaking stride. "What made you folks choose Earth for your research? Seems like you find our planet pretty uncomfortable." Galork considered how to explain concepts that most spacefaring civilizations took for granted. Earth is classified as a Class 4 death world in the Galactic Habitability Index, he began. Only 8 such planets have developed technological civilizations. Your species is of particular interest because you appear to have evolved without intervention. Intervention? Michael raised those expressive eyebrows again. Most species on extreme condition worlds required biological engineering by precursor civilizations to achieve sentience, Galork explained. The standard evolutionary pathway to intelligence requires stable environmental conditions over millions of years. Earth's constant disruptions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, tectonic activity, should have reset your evolutionary timeline repeatedly. Michael laughed, a sound that still triggered Galork's threat assessment subroutines, despite his intellectual understanding of its social function. "So we're scientific freaks," Michael said. "Makes sense. You should see how excited human scientists get about extremophile bacteria." The irony of the comparison was not lost on Galork. To most galactic civilizations, humans were the extremophiles. Bizarre organisms that somehow functioned in conditions that would kill most sentient species within hours. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp notification from Desir. "Lead researcher, I am detecting significant microbiological activity in the current environment. Pathogen density exceeds safety parameters." Galork checked his own sensors. The readings were accurate. The surrounding air contained billions of microbial organisms per cubic meter, many with potentially harmful properties. "Is there contamination in your filtration systems?" Galork asked Michael, genuine concern in his voice. Michael looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Your breathing apparatus, is it malfunctioning? The air contains dangerous levels of biological contaminants?" Understanding dawned on Michael's face, followed by that expression of amusement again. "Oh, you mean like bacteria and stuff? Yeah, that's normal. We breathe that all the time." The 3 other Prontelec scientists had moved closer, their suit sensors now detecting the same microbial soup. Junior researcher Katol's voice came through with undisguised alarm. "The human is deliberately inhaling pathogenic microbes," he reported unnecessarily, "without filtration or sterilization." Michael glanced between them, clearly trying to process their concern. "Listen, our bodies handle it. We've evolved with these microorganisms. They're part of our environment. Some are even beneficial." Galork knew the theoretical principles of human immune response, but seeing this casual coexistence with potential pathogens was profoundly unsettling. The human stood there, breathing in particles that would trigger catastrophic immune collapse in most sentient species, as if it were nothing remarkable. "Let's continue," Galork decided, filing away this observation for his research notes, "but maintain elevated biohazard protocols." As they resumed their hike, Galork noticed Michael occasionally touching surfaces, tree bark, stone outcroppings, even the soil itself, with his bare skin. Each contact transferred thousands of microorganisms to his epidermis, yet he showed no concern. When they stopped at a clearing for what Michael called a rest break, Galork observed the human removing a container of water and consuming it without sterilization. The casualness with which he introduced unfiltered substances into his body was simultaneously fascinating and horrifying. "Your species' biological resilience exceeds our theoretical models, Galork commented, trying to maintain scientific detachment. The microbial load you tolerate would be considered a severe biohazard on most worlds. Michael took another drink from his water container. I guess that's why you're all wearing those suits? I thought it might be because of our atmosphere or gravity. Your atmosphere is barely tolerable, Tazir interjected. The oxygen content alone would be considered toxic on our homeworld, but the biological factors are of greater concern. Michael nodded thoughtfully. So that's why you haven't colonized Earth? Despite having interstellar travel? Our germs keep you away? The question held such innocent curiosity that Glorhek felt a moment of something like pity. Humans had no conception of their place in the galactic hierarchy. They believed their isolation was a matter of cosmic distance rather than biological incompatibility. Colonization is not our objective, Galork stated carefully. The Galactic Concord has strict protocols regarding Deathworld civilizations. Deathworld, Michael repeated. That's what you keep calling Earth. Seems a bit dramatic for what's just home to us. Galork was formulating a response when his environmental sensors triggered an urgent alert. The atmospheric pressure was dropping rapidly, and electromagnetic disturbances were increasing in the vicinity. The storm system, Tazir announced, her voice resonating with tension. It has accelerated beyond predicted parameters. Michael glanced at the sky, where dark clouds were indeed gathering with surprising speed. His casual demeanor shifted subtly toward what Galork recognized as focused alertness. That's moving faster than forecast, he acknowledged. We should probably head back to your base camp. As they began their descent, Galork noted that Michael's movement patterns had changed. The human now moved with greater precision, his visual attention constantly scanning their surroundings. It was the first time Galork had seen anything resembling caution in their guide. This, more than any previous observation, caused Galork's scientific curiosity to heighten. If something could make a Deathworld native exercise caution, perhaps they were about to witness environmental conditions that challenged even human adaptability. The expedition was about to become considerably more enlightening than Galork had anticipated. The first fat droplets of rain struck Galork's environmental suit with audible impacts. His exterior sensors registered each collision, calculating the increasing precipitation rate with growing concern. What had begun as isolated droplets quickly intensified into a steady downpour. This is just the leading edge, Michael called out over the mounting percussion of rain. We need to pick up the pace. The Prontilix scientists struggled to maintain their footing on the now slick trail. Their suits, designed primarily for biological isolation rather than adverse weather conditions, offered limited traction enhancement. Glork observed with scientific detachment, even as his limbs flailed for balance, how Michael's footwear seemed to grip the muddy surface with relative ease. Atmospheric electrical discharge detected, Catull reported unnecessarily as a brilliant flash illuminated the forest, followed seconds later by a concussive sound that reverberated through Galork's primary and secondary auditory membranes. That was close, Michael said, his voice tight with what Galork's translator identified as controlled concern. Under the trees isn't the safest place right now. The notion that their current location was unsafe seemed redundant to Galork. The entire planet was unsafe by Prontilix standards. Yet the human statement suggested a hierarchy of danger that fascinated his scientific mind, even as it triggered his survival instincts. What is the recommended protocol? Glorhak inquired, trying to keep his voice level as another lightning strike illuminated the darkening sky. There's an old ranger station about half a kilometer ahead, Michael replied, pointing down the trail. Solid construction, lightning rod installed. Better than staying exposed. As they hurried forward, the rain intensified to a degree Galork had previously considered theoretically impossible. Water didn't so much fall as exist in a continuous state between liquid and gas, saturating the air itself. His suit's exterior sensors began reporting diminished functionality. Invisibility dropped to less than 20 meters. Maintain physical proximity, Glork instructed his team. Visual identification is compromised. Michael moved with surprising confidence despite the conditions, occasionally looking back to ensure the scientists were following. When junior researcher Vitok stumbled on a concealed route, Michael was beside him with remarkable speed, steadying the Prontilix with a casual strength that belied his lean frame. Careful there, the human said, helping Vitok regain balance. The ground's getting pretty treacherous. Glork noted that Michael's body temperature remained stable despite being soaked with rain. The passive thermal regulation capabilities of human physiology continued to defy conventional biological models. No heat exchange membranes, no specialized cooling fluids, just an intricate system of sweat glands and vascular constriction that somehow maintained homeostasis in wildly variant conditions. After what felt like an eternity of struggling through increasingly hazardous terrain, a structure emerged from the curtain of rain. The ranger station was a simple geometric construction of processed vegetation. Wood, Glork reminded himself, with a sloped roof designed to shed precipitation. Michael reached the door first, manipulating a primitive mechanical locking mechanism. "Get inside quickly," he directed, holding the door as the scientists filed in. The interior was Spartan but dry, containing basic furniture and what appeared to be communication equipment. Glork's environmental suit immediately began assessing the enclosed atmosphere, reporting high humidity but otherwise stable conditions. "Power's out," Michael observed, manipulating controls on the wall without result. "That happens during storms. There's emergency lighting, though." He retrieved a cylindrical object from a cabinet and manipulated its end. A beam of directed photons emerged, illuminating the space with harsh directional light. "Your emergency illumination technology seems rudimentary," Tazir observed. "No ambient glow symbiotes?" Michael's expression registered confusion before understanding. "Oh, you mean like bioluminescent lighting?" "No, we mostly use LEDs and batteries for emergency situations. Simple, reliable." Glork was about to inquire further when a deafening crash shook the structure. His suit sensors momentarily overloaded from the acoustic pressure. "Lightning strike," Michael announced, moving quickly to the window. "Very close. Everyone okay?" The Prontelec scientists had instinctively clustered together, their species' communal stress response activating. Glork forced himself to maintain scientific objectivity despite his autonomic system's urging retreat. "We are undamaged," he reported, "though our communications with the orbital vessel may be compromised." Michael nodded, checking a primitive device strapped to his wrist. "Cell service is down too. That's normal during big storms. We'll just wait it out." The casual acceptance with which the human approached their situation continued to fascinate Glork. Here they were, trapped in a flimsy structure while massive electrical discharges occurred meters away, and Michael behaved as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a survival scenario. "I apologize for the itinerary deviation," Michael continued, removing items from his backpack. "Forecast said we had another day before this system moved in. Climate change has made weather prediction more challenging lately." Glork processed this statement with interest. "Your species alters planetary climate while still being subject to its effects?" Michael laughed. That discomfiting but now familiar vocalization. "Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of the human condition. We're smart enough to change our environment, but not always wise enough to predict the consequences." He distributed what he called emergency blankets, thin metallized polymer sheets designed to preserve body heat. The Prontolecs had no need for them with their environmental suits, but Glork accepted one for analysis nonetheless. "Your emergency preparations seem minimal by our standards," Glork observed, "yet you display confidence in survival outcomes." Michael shrugged as he checked the supplies in a red container marked with a symbolic cross. "Humans are adaptable. We've survived worse than thunderstorms. Besides, this building has weathered hundreds of storms before us." The structure creaked ominously, as if challenging this assertion. Metal fixtures groaning under wind forces that Glork estimated were approaching destructive thresholds. "May I ask a scientific question, Michael?" Tazir inquired, her voice modulator adjusted to project calm curiosity. "Sure thing," the human replied, settling onto a bench near the door, where he could monitor both the storm outside and his charges within. "Why does your species establish habitation in regions prone to such extreme meteorological events?" "Our historical survey indicates humans frequently build settlements in floodplains, volcanic proximity zones, and tectonically active regions." Michael considered this question with surprising thoughtfulness for what Glork had categorized as a physically oriented guide rather than an intellectual specialist. Resources mostly, he finally answered. Fertile soil tends to be in floodplains. Volcanic regions have mineral wealth and geothermal energy. We go where we can thrive, and we figure out how to deal with the risks. Accept danger for potential benefit, Cotol murmured. The concept clearly alien to Prontillic's evolutionary psychology, which strongly favored risk avoidance. As if punctuating this philosophical difference, another thunderous crash sounded, this one accompanied by the distinctive splintering of wood. A section of the ceiling gave way, allowing a torrent of water to pour into the structure. Michael reacted with remarkable speed, moving to assess the damage. Everyone back from that corner, he directed, his tone shifting to what Glork recognized as command authority. The roof's compromised. The Prontilec scientists retreated to the far side of the structure as Michael quickly began arranging containers to catch the incoming water and moving equipment away from the damaged area. Structure integrity at 67% and declining, Vitok reported, his suit's analytical functions providing real-time assessment. Recommend immediate evacuation protocol. Evacuation to where? Michael asked practically. It's worse outside. This is still our best option. Glork observed the human's response with intense scientific interest. Michael displayed neither panic nor resignation, but instead a focused problem-solving approach that seemed to accept the danger as simply another variable to manage. Another crash from outside, and through the window, Glork observed a massive vegetation column, a tree toppling toward their shelter. Get down, Michael shouted, diving toward the Prontilec scientists with startling speed. The impact was tremendous, the tree smashing through the roof and wall of the station. Glork's suit automatically deployed emergency stabilization measures as debris cascaded around them. When the chaos subsided, he realized that Michael had physically positioned himself between the falling debris and the scientists, his body serving as organic shielding. Is everyone intact? Michael asked, rising and brushing splinters from his shoulders, apparently unconcerned about multiple lacerations now visible on his exposed skin. You are damaged, Glork observed, his scientific detachment momentarily overridden by concern. Michael glanced at his arm where a significant cut was seeping red, circulatory fluid. Just a scratch. I've had worse from cooking dinner. He calmly retrieved the red container, first aid kit, and proceeded to clean and seal the wound with practiced efficiency, all while continuing to assess their deteriorating shelter. We've got a problem, he announced after examining the damage. That tree took out the main support beam. This structure isn't going to hold much longer. Glork's suit sensors confirmed this assessment, calculating structural failure within the next 30 minutes based on current wind forces and material fatigue. What is the recommended survival procedure? Glork asked, genuinely curious how the human would approach this escalating threat. Michael's response was immediate and decisive. We need to move to the emergency shelter. There's a reinforced storm bunker about 200 meters northwest of here. It's built into the hillside specifically for situations like this. Moving through the storm presents significant hazards, Tazir pointed out. Our suits provide limited mobility enhancement. Staying here presents a greater hazard, Michael countered. I know the trail. We'll link up physically to prevent separation, and I'll lead. Glork watched as the human quickly fashioned a connection system from rope in his pack, creating a physical tether for the scientists to hold. Such a simple solution, yet effectively adapted to their circumstances. We'll wait for a break in the lightning, Michael explained, watching the storm patterns through the broken wall. When I give the signal, we move quickly but carefully. Stay close. Do exactly as I do. The directness of these instructions was notably different from the casual conversational pattern Michael had previously employed. Glork recognized that the human had shifted into what his cultural studies identified as emergency response mode, a focused psychological state optimized for survival conditions. There, Michael said after several minutes of observation, lightning's moved east. This is our window. Everyone ready? The Prontilec scientists activated their suit's maximum environmental protection protocols as Michael secured the lead tether around his waist. Stay close, step where I step, he instructed once more before leading them out into the howling maelstrom. The conditions outside the damaged shelter exceeded Glork's worst projections. Rain fell with such intensity that it seemed to defy the planet's gravitational constraints. Wind gusted with near-solid force, requiring compensation adjustments from his suit's stability systems. Debris, vegetation, soil, unidentifiable objects flew through the air with lethal velocity. Yet through this chaos, Michael moved with purposeful determination. His body leaned into the wind at precisely the angle needed to maintain forward progress. His vision somehow functioned despite the sheets of water obscuring everything beyond arm's length. He occasionally called back encouragement and directions, his voice somehow carrying over the storm's roar. Gloric observed that the human didn't fight against the environmental forces, but rather worked with them, adjusting his movements to accommodate sudden gusts, finding natural windbreaks, choosing footing with uncanny precision despite minimal visibility. After what felt like an interminable struggle against elemental forces, a new structure emerged from the storm-shrouded landscape. Unlike the wooden ranger station, this appeared to be a reinforced construction partially embedded in the hillside, with a heavy door designed to withstand extreme conditions. Michael reached it first, manipulating another mechanical locking system with practiced ease despite his shaking hands. A physiological reaction to cold that fascinated Galork even in their dire circumstances. The door swung open, revealing a Spartan interior illuminated by emergency lighting. "Everyone inside," Michael directed, holding the door against the wind's attempt to tear it from his grasp. One by one, the Prontilex scientists stumbled into the shelter. Glork entered last, his scientific sensors automatically beginning to analyze the new environment, even as his primary consciousness focused on survival. Michael secured the door behind them, engaging multiple locking mechanisms. The sudden absence of wind and rain created an almost disorienting silence, broken only by the muffled howling outside and the hum of the scientists' environmental suits. "Emergency bunker," Michael explained, gesturing around the small space. "Built to withstand Category 5 hurricanes, tornadoes, you name it. We're safe now." Galork observed that despite this assertion of safety, the human's body continued to display stress indicators: elevated respiration, dilated pupils, fine motor tremors. Michael was experiencing fear response while simultaneously projecting confidence. "Your species routinely constructs shelters to withstand such environmental extremes?" Tazir inquired, her scientific curiosity evidently recovering now that immediate survival was secured. "In areas prone to severe weather, yes," Michael replied, checking supplies stored in wall compartments. "This region gets hit by major storms a few times a year, so all the park facilities have reinforced shelters." He distributed sealed packages labeled emergency rations and containers of water to each of the scientists, though their environmental suits made consumption impossible. "For when we get back to your base camp," he explained with a tired smile. "The storm should pass by morning, but we'll be staying here tonight." Glork found himself experiencing a complex emotional response that transcended pure scientific interest. The human had effectively saved their lives, risking his own comparatively fragile body in the process. This demonstrated not only the physical adaptability that made humans evolutionary anomalies, but also decision-making priorities that seemed counterintuitive for a species that had survived on a death world. "Your actions prioritized our safety above your own," Galork observed. "This seems contradictory to optimal survival strategy." Michael looked up from where he was examining his minor injuries, surprise evident in his expression. "It's my job to keep you safe. Besides, it's just what humans do. We look out for each other and for guests in our territory." "Even non-human guests," Cattol clarified, apparently also struggling with the concept. "Especially non-human guests," Michael replied with another smile. "You're not familiar with our world's dangers. That makes you my responsibility." This protection of the vulnerable behavior pattern was documented in human sociological studies, but seeing it manifested under genuine threat conditions provided valuable empirical data. Glork filed the observation for later analysis. As the storm continued to rage outside their shelter, Michael methodically checked each of the scientists' environmental suits for damage, helped establish communication protocols for the night, and organized the small space for maximum comfort given their circumstances. Throughout this process, Galork noted that the human's own comfort appeared to be his lowest priority. Michael remained in wet clothing, consumed minimal sustenance, and positioned himself nearest the door, the area most vulnerable to potential breach. You should rest, Michael finally suggested after completing his organizational tasks. I'll keep watch and wake everyone if there's any change in conditions. Your species requires regular unconsciousness periods, Galork pointed out. You also should engage in sleep behavior. Michael nodded, settling onto a bench near the door. I will, in shifts. Old hiking guide habit. Someone stays alert when conditions are unpredictable. As the Prontilix scientists initiated their rest cycles, reducing suit functions to conservation levels, Glork continued to observe the human. Michael maintained vigilance despite obvious fatigue, occasionally checking monitoring equipment or listening intently to the storm's patterns. This resilience, not just physical but psychological, was perhaps the most remarkable human adaptation. On their death world, they had developed not only the biological capacity to withstand extreme conditions, but the mental fortitude to remain functional under prolonged stress. Glork accessed his research database, reviewing historical accounts of human behavior under adverse conditions. The archive contained thousands of cases where humans had survived seemingly unsurvivable situations through a combination of physiological adaptations and psychological determination that bordered on the pathological by Prontilix standards. The storm outside intensified, the bunker's walls vibrating with the force of wind and impacts from flying debris. Yet inside, Michael Tanaka sat calmly monitoring conditions, occasionally making notes in a small waterproof book, seemingly unperturbed by the violence occurring meters away. Glork realized that the expedition's original research parameters were woefully inadequate. They had come to study human biological adaptations to a deathworld environment, but the true anomaly was perhaps more complex, a species that had not merely survived hostile conditions, but had developed a relationship with danger itself, neither ignoring nor surrendering to it, but engaging with it as a negotiating partner. As the night progressed and the storm showed no signs of abating, Glork wondered what other revelations awaited them. The expedition had barely begun, and already their understanding of humanity was being fundamentally rewritten. Dawn arrived with deceptive gentleness. The storm's fury had abated sometime during the night cycle, leaving behind an eerie stillness that Glork found almost as disquieting as the chaos that had preceded it. His environmental sensors, which had been reporting dangerous conditions for hours, now indicated only elevated humidity and scattered debris particulates. Michael was already awake, or perhaps had never truly slept, when Glork's suit systems initiated full operational status. The human stood at the bunker's narrow viewport, surveying the transformed landscape outside. Morning, Michael greeted him without turning. Storms passed. Left quite a mess behind, though. Glork joined him at the viewport. The forest they had traversed yesterday was almost unrecognizable. Massive trees lay scattered like discarded playthings. Streams had overflowed their banks, creating new waterways where paths had been. The entire topography had been reshaped by a single night of meteorological violence. The probability of such extensive transformation occurring in a matter of hours contradicts standard geological models, Glork observed. Michael's expression displayed that now familiar mixture of amusement and weariness. Earth doesn't much care about models. Ready to head back to your base camp? It'll be slow going with all the debris. The other scientists were now activating their systems, environmental suits humming as diagnostic protocols ran. Tazir approached the viewport, her optical sensors contracting at the scene outside. Our scientific equipment, she said. If the ranger station was destroyed? Michael nodded in understanding. We'll check it on the way back. Some of it might have survived, especially anything in waterproof cases. As they prepared to leave the emergency shelter, Glork observed Michael performing a series of stretching movements. When questioned, the human explained they were to work out the kinks from sleeping in a confined space. Your musculoskeletal system requires realignment after inactivity? Glork inquired. Something like that, Michael replied, rotating his shoulders. Nothing serious, just getting the blood flowing. Another fascinating adaptation. The human body required regular movement to maintain optimal function, yet could recover from significant physical stress through periods of immobility. The contradictions in human physiology continued to accumulate. When they finally emerged from the bunker, the full extent of the storm's impact became apparent. What had been a defined trail was now an obstacle course of fallen vegetation, standing water, and destabilized terrain. "Stay close," Michael advised, testing a log with his foot before using it as a crossing point over a newly formed stream. "Some of this ground won't be stable." The journey back toward their original location proved significantly more challenging than Michael's casual instructions had implied. Multiple times, the human had to physically assist the Pronalex scientists across obstacles, his strength-to-weight ratio again defying Galork's biological expectations. "How do you determine which surfaces will support weight?" Vitak inquired after Michael guided them around what appeared to be solid ground, but was apparently treacherous. "Experience mostly," Michael replied, "but also reading subtle indicators, how water flows around an area, vegetation patterns, color changes in soil. You develop an eye for it after spending enough time outdoors." This intuitive environmental interpretation seemed to operate at a level below conscious calculation, an integration of multiple sensory inputs processed against experiential data. Galork made additional notes in his research log, increasingly convinced that human adaptability extended beyond pure physical resilience into perceptual domains that might have applications in xenoscience. When they reached the remains of the ranger station, the destruction was even more complete than Galork had anticipated. The structure had essentially collapsed, with only one wall partially standing. Scientific equipment cases were visible amid the wreckage, some clearly damaged beyond recovery. "Let's salvage what we can," Michael suggested, already moving carefully through the debris. "Watch for protruding nails and broken glass." As they worked to retrieve their equipment, a notification from the orbiting Empirical Discovery finally reached Galork's communications system. "Lead researcher, we have been attempting to establish contact for 12 standard hours," came the voice of Ship Commander Palath. "Atmospheric conditions prevented signal penetration. Are extraction protocols required?" "Negative, Commander," Galork responded. "The expedition continues. We experienced severe meteorological events, but have maintained research integrity." This might have been overstating their situation, given the equipment losses, but Galork found himself reluctant to terminate the mission. The past day's events, while dangerous, had provided invaluable observational data on human responses to crisis conditions. "Several key sample containers remain intact," Tazir reported, holding up sealed cases. "The biological specimens and atmospheric analysis equipment are functional." "Good news," as Michael said, carefully lifting a fallen beam to reveal more equipment. "This stuff is built pretty tough." As they continued salvage operations, Galork noticed Michael periodically pausing to listen intently, his head tilting slightly as if detecting sounds beyond the Prontilex's auditory range. "Is there a concern?" Galork inquired after the third such instance. Michael hesitated before responding. "Probably nothing. Just thought I heard something moving in the woods. After big storms, sometimes unstable trees can fall even after the wind dies down." Galork's suit sensors detected no significant acoustic anomalies, but he noted that human auditory processing might be detecting pattern variations rather than pure sound intensity, another adaptation to environmental threat recognition. They had nearly completed their salvage operation when Michael suddenly froze, his body language shifting to what Galork now recognized as high alert. "Everyone stop moving," the human said quietly but firmly, "and stay absolutely still." The Prontilex scientists complied immediately, their evolutionary response to authority assertion in crisis situations overriding scientific curiosity. "What is?" Cattol began, but Michael raised a hand for silence. "Mountain lion," Michael whispered, his eyes fixed on a point in the forest beyond the destroyed station. "Female, probably displaced by the storm. She's hunting." Galork's visual sensors detected nothing, even when switched to enhanced spectrum modes. Yet Michael stood absolutely motionless, his breathing pattern altered to minimize movement. His posture slightly changed to what appeared to be a defensive stance. Then Galork saw it, a large quadrupedal predator moving with liquid grace along the forest edge. The creature was perfectly adapted to its environment, its coloration blending with the dappled light and shadow patterns. Its mass and muscle structure suggested formidable hunting capabilities. "Is this organism a significant threat?" Galork whispered, his suit's voice projection reduced to minimum. Very, Michael replied without moving his head. She's confused and hungry after the storm. Makes her unpredictable. What happened next occurred too quickly for Galoric's observational protocols to fully process. The predator, apparently detecting their presence despite their stillness, suddenly charged toward the group with astonishing speed. Galoric's suit calculated the creature's velocity at over 15 meters per second. Its trajectory aimed directly at Tazir, who stood closest to the forest edge. Simultaneously, Michael moved. The human's reaction time bypassed Galoric's anticipatory models, his body launching into intercepting motion before the Prontilix scientists' threat assessment systems had even triggered emergency protocols. Michael positioned himself between Tazir and the charging predator, his posture expanding as he raised his arms and emitted a vocalization of such volume and tonal authority that Galoric's audio sensors automatically dampened to prevent overload. The predator, nearly airborne in its attack leap, hesitated for a crucial fraction of a second. In that moment, Michael seized a length of metal debris and swung it in a calculated arc that didn't strike the creature but established a clear territorial boundary. "Back!" Michael shouted, the single syllable carrying a dominance assertion that transcended species boundaries. The mountain lion, a predator evolved over millions of years to hunt in these forests, paused, its biological imperative to secure prey balanced against risk assessment. For 3 seconds, that felt like temporal anomalies. Human and predator engaged in a complex negotiation conducted through body language and eye contact. Then, with a low vocalization that registered as threat display on Galoric's translators, the predator retreated, moving back into the forest with the same fluid grace, but now maintaining visual contact with Michael until it disappeared into the undergrowth. "Everyone okay?" Michael asked, his voice returning to normal volume, though his body remained oriented toward the predator's departure path. "You confronted an apex predator without weapons," Vitok stated, his voice modulator unable to fully convey his evident shock. Michael didn't immediately respond, his attention still focused on the forest edge. After several seconds, he seemed satisfied the danger had passed and turned back to the group. "Old ranger trick," he finally said, setting down the metal bar. "Mountain lions usually avoid humans, but when they're stressed or hungry, they can get bold. Making yourself look bigger and showing confidence often works. They're calculating hunters. If the risk seems too high, they'll usually back down." "You placed yourself in extreme danger to protect Tazir," Galoric observed, still processing the implications of the human's actions. Michael shrugged, that quintessential human gesture of downplaying significance. "It's what anyone would do." "Negative," Cattol interjected. "Statistical modeling indicates that interposing oneself between a non-kin member and an apex predator represents behavior outside normal evolutionary survival parameters." This comment seemed to genuinely puzzle Michael. "You're saying most species wouldn't put themselves at risk for others?" "Risk assessment typically prioritizes individual survival, except in cases of genetic continuation benefit," Tazir explained. "Your species appears to extend protection behaviors beyond reproductive advantage calculations." Michael laughed, though Galoric detected undertones of nervous energy release rather than genuine amusement. "Well, when you put it that way, I guess humans are weird. But from our perspective, looking out for each other, including visitors, is just basic decency." As they gathered the remaining salvageable equipment and prepared to return to the base camp, Galoric found himself contemplating this interaction. The human had demonstrated not only physical capabilities that defied conventional threat response models, but ethical frameworks that appeared to contradict standard evolutionary theory. Their journey back to the base camp proceeded without further incident, though Galoric noted that Michael maintained a heightened state of environmental awareness, frequently scanning their surroundings and occasionally stopping to listen. This persistent vigilance, despite evident fatigue, represented another remarkable human adaptation: the ability to sustain alertness even after significant physical and psychological stress. Upon reaching the base camp, which had weathered the storm with minimal damage due to its positioning in a sheltered valley, Michael assisted the scientists in reorganizing their equipment and establishing communications with the orbiting vessel. The empirical discovery reports significant data collection during the meteorological event, Commander Palath informed them. However, there is a matter requiring immediate attention. Our deep scan probes have detected an anomalous structure approximately 3 kilometers from your current position. Anomalous in what manner? Glork inquired. The composition includes materials not consistent with current human technological development, Palath replied. Preliminary analysis suggests artificial construction of considerable age, possibly predating human civilization in the region. This information instantly reoriented the expedition's priorities. The discovery of non-human artifacts on Earth would represent a significant archaeological find and might provide context for humanity's anomalous evolutionary trajectory. Can you provide coordinates? Glork requested. After receiving the location data, he turned to Michael. Our instruments have detected what may be an archaeological site of interest. Would guidance to these coordinates be possible? Michael studied the location information with a thoughtful expression. That's in a pretty remote area. No established trails. The storm probably made access even more difficult. He looked up with renewed interest. What kind of site are we talking about? Glork considered how to phrase their discovery without violating Concord protocols regarding information sharing with Deathworld species. Potentially a structure predating local historical records. Our scanning technology detected unusual material composition. This vague explanation seemed to satisfy Michael, who was already consulting his maps. We could reach it by tomorrow if we start early. It'll be rough going after the storm, but I'm curious now. There shouldn't be any structures out there that I know of. The expedition's scientific focus shifted rapidly to preparation for this new objective. Equipment was reorganized, research priorities adjusted, and communication protocols established with the orbiting vessel for continuous data transmission. Through this activity, Glork observed Michael working with efficient precision, his earlier fatigue seemingly forgotten in the face of new discovery potential. This cognitive flexibility, the ability to deprioritize physical discomfort when presented with novel stimuli, represented yet another adaptive advantage. As night fell and the scientists prepared for their rest cycle, Glork approached Michael, who sat examining his maps by the light of a chemical illumination device. I wish to express gratitude for your actions today, Glork stated formally. Your intervention with the predator likely prevented serious harm. Michael looked up, surprise evident in his expression. No need for thanks. Like I said, it's just what we do. He paused, then added, though I admit that was closer than I'd like. Mountain lions usually give humans a wide berth. Your species' relationship with Earth's predator organisms appears complex, Glork observed. You demonstrate respect rather than dominance behaviors. Michael nodded, his attention returning to the maps. Humans learn the hard way that trying to eliminate predators causes more problems than it solves. Healthy ecosystems need apex predators. We've moved from trying to conquer nature to trying to live alongside it, mostly anyway. This philosophical stance seemed remarkably evolved for a species that had developed on a planet where nearly every organism represented a potential threat. Glork had expected humans to display more aggressive environmental control behaviors. Tomorrow's route looks challenging, Michael continued, indicating areas on his map. The storm probably took down a lot of the forest canopy in this valley. We'll need to be careful crossing these slopes, high landslide risk after heavy rain. You anticipate further environmental hazards despite the storm's passage, Glork noted. On Earth, the aftermath of a disaster often creates its own dangers, Michael replied. Unstable ground, contaminated water, displaced wildlife. Sometimes the real challenges start after the obvious threat ends. This awareness of cascading environmental effects demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of ecological interconnections. Humans had not merely adapted to survive immediate threats, but had developed predictive models for secondary and tertiary consequences. As Michael outlined their approach for the following day, Glork found his scientific objectivity increasingly difficult to maintain. The human continued to defy categorization, simultaneously displaying primitive physical responses and sophisticated conceptual frameworks, immediate threat reactions, and long-term strategic planning. The Deathworld paradox that had initially prompted the expedition was proving even more profound than Glork had anticipated. Humans hadn't merely survived Earth's hostility, they had developed a relationship with danger itself that transcended mere adaptation and approached something like partnership. What awaited them at the anomalous structure might provide historical context for this evolutionary mystery. If non-human intelligence had previously visited Earth, perhaps humanity's unique characteristics could be explained through intervention or influence. Yet as Galork observed Michael meticulously preparing for the next day's challenges, checking equipment, studying terrain, calculating resource requirements, he found himself considering an alternative hypothesis. Perhaps humanity's remarkable capabilities weren't the result of outside influence at all, but rather the natural outcome of evolution on a world that never stopped trying to kill its inhabitants. The storm that had nearly destroyed them might, in evolutionary terms, be the very force that had created the remarkable species now planning their next move with such casual competence. Morning arrived with a clarity that belied the previous day's chaos. The storm had scoured the atmosphere, leaving visibility exceptional across the valley. Galoric's environmental sensors reported air quality parameters that approached optimal levels, a rare occurrence on Earth according to their preliminary studies. Michael had awakened before any of the Prontelic scientists, already preparing nutrition and organizing equipment for their expedition to the anomalous structure. Galorc observed that despite minimal rest, the human displayed no significant performance degradation. Weather's perfect for hiking today, Michael greeted them as the scientists emerged from their temporary habitats. Clear skies should hold for at least 48 hours, according to the latest forecast. Your meteorological prediction technology demonstrated limited accuracy regarding the previous storm system, Tazir pointed out. Michael smiled, the expression registering as self-deprecating rather than defensive. Fair criticism, but the atmospheric conditions are much more stable now. High pressure system moving in, no conflicting fronts. We should be fine. This casual confidence in the face of recent evidence to the contrary fascinated Galorc. Humans appeared capable of simultaneously acknowledging past failures while maintaining optimism about future outcomes. A cognitive dissonance that somehow enhanced rather than impaired their functionality. As they prepared to depart, the empirical discovery provided updated scans of the anomalous structure. Imagery enhancement confirms artificial construction, Palath reported. The structure appears partially embedded in the mountainside, with evidence of deliberate concealment. Material composition includes elements not found in Earth's natural geological formations. Glork shared this information with Michael, who studied the crude visual representation with evident curiosity. That's definitely not on any map, he confirmed, and it's not consistent with Native American structures in this region. Could be some kind of old military installation, I suppose, though this area wasn't typically used for that. The human's immediate attempt to contextualize the anomaly within his existing knowledge framework demonstrated the pattern-seeking behavior that characterized human cognition. Rather than expressing disbelief or dismissal, Michael immediately began generating hypotheses based on available information. Their journey to the coordinates began through forest terrain that, while damaged by the storm, offered relatively straightforward navigation. Michael established a pace that balanced efficiency with energy conservation, occasionally pointing out features of the recovering ecosystem. See how quickly life bounces back? He observed, indicating small mammals emerging from burrows and birds reclaiming territories. Earth's biodiversity is all about resilience and rapid adaptation. Storm like that is just another Tuesday from an evolutionary perspective. As they progressed deeper into the wilderness, the terrain gradually shifted from mixed forest to steeper, rocky inclines. The storm's impact was visible in fresh landslides and altered waterways, requiring frequent course adjustments. The coordinates are just beyond that ridge, Galorc indicated after consulting their positioning system. Approximately 1 kilometer remaining. Michael nodded, studying the landscape with a thoughtful expression. That's going to be tricky. The approach is steeper than it looked on the maps, and there's evidence of significant erosion from the storm. We'll need to be extremely careful on those slopes. The humans' risk assessment proved accurate. As they began their ascent, the combination of loose soil, damaged vegetation, and hidden washouts created hazardous conditions that tested even Michael's navigational skills. Step exactly where I step, he instructed, demonstrating a precise foot placement technique that distributed weight to minimize ground disturbance. And use these for support. He distributed what he called trekking poles, adjustable staffs that provided additional stability on the uneven terrain. Glork noted how the simple mechanical devices effectively compensated for the biological limitations of bipedal locomotion on unstable surfaces. Another example of humans using technology to overcome environmental challenges. Their progress slowed considerably, each meter requiring careful assessment and strategic movement. Michael frequently tested ground stability before allowing the scientists to proceed, occasionally establishing improvised hand lines across particularly treacherous sections. Despite these precautions, disaster nearly struck when K'tol lost footing on a deceptively solid-appearing surface. The scientists began sliding toward a significant drop-off, environmental suit sensors blaring warnings as stabilization systems struggled to compensate. Michael reacted with that now familiar preternatural speed, driving his trekking pole into the ground as an anchor point and extending his body to intercept K'tol's slide. The human's muscular skeletal system shouldered forces that Glork's suit calculated would cause significant structural damage to Pronolex's physiology. "I've got you," Michael assured K'tol, gradually helping the scientist regain stable positioning. "Take it slow, small movements until you're back on solid ground." Once the immediate danger had passed, Glork expected Michael to recommend retreat or an alternative route. Instead, the human spent several minutes analyzing the failed terrain, identifying subtle indicators of instability that they had previously overlooked. "See this color variation in the soil," he pointed out, "and how the vegetation patterns change. Those are warning signs. We need to stay on the rocky outcroppings as much as possible for the rest of the ascent." Rather than avoiding the hazard, Michael was analyzing it, extracting information that would improve their subsequent navigation. This approach, treating danger as a source of valuable data rather than simply a condition to be avoided, seemed fundamentally different from standard risk-response behaviors in most sentient species. With redoubled caution, they continued their ascent until finally cresting the ridge that had obscured their destination. What awaited them exceeded all expectations. Partially embedded in the mountainside was a structure of unmistakably artificial design. Its architecture followed no human construction pattern Glork had studied in preparation for the expedition. Geometric forms followed mathematical principles that suggested non-terrestrial origin, with surfaces composed of a metallic substance that retained structural integrity despite evident age. "That's not human-made," Michael stated, his voice containing what Glork's translator identified as controlled awe. "Unless you guys know something about secret government projects that I don't. This construction is not of Earth origin," Glork confirmed, seeing no reason to maintain protocol concealment given the obvious visual evidence. "Our preliminary analysis suggests considerable age, potentially predating human civilization in this region by thousands of years." Michael absorbed this information with remarkable equanimity. "Alien artifacts on Earth, right here in the National Forest." He shook his head slightly, then added with unexpected humor, "My hiking guide certification definitely didn't cover this scenario." The structure's entrance was partially obscured by a landslide that appeared recent, possibly triggered by the storm. This fortuitous timing explained why the anomaly had remained undetected by human observation, despite its significant size. As they approached, Glork's sensors began registering faint energy signatures emanating from the structure. Patterns consistent with hibernating technology rather than random degradation. The construction appears to maintain minimal operational status despite its age, Glork reported to both his team and the orbiting vessel. "Recommend establishment of comprehensive scanning perimeter before attempted entry." While the scientists began deploying their analytical equipment, Michael circled the structure, examining it with what Glork now recognized as a tactical assessment rather than mere curiosity. "The entrance looks stable enough," the human reported after completing his inspection. "Recent landslide actually cleared what might have been centuries of accumulated debris. Timing's a bit convenient, isn't it?" This observation demonstrated the human capacity for pattern recognition that extended beyond immediate causality into speculative correlation, what humans might call intuition, but represented a sophisticated cognitive processing of subliminal environmental cues. As the scientific team established their monitoring equipment, the empirical discovery transmitted additional analytical data. Material composition confirms Prontilex origin, Commander Palath reported, the formal tone of her communication failing to mask what Galoric recognized as profound shock. Structural design and energy signature patterns are consistent with late Imperial period exploration technology. Galoric's primary and secondary cardiovascular systems experienced momentary arrhythmia as the implications registered. Confirm classification, Commander. You are indicating this is a Prontilex facility? Affirmative, lead researcher. Preliminary dating algorithms suggest construction approximately 7,000 Earth years ago, during what our historical records identify as the Third Expansion Era. The significance of this discovery cascaded through Galoric's consciousness. No historical record indicated Prontilex exploration of Earth during that period. Yet the evidence before them was unequivocal. His own species had visited this death world millennia before their current expedition and had established a significant outpost. Michael had moved closer, clearly sensing the scientist's reaction to this new information. You recognize this technology, he stated rather than asked. This isn't just any alien structure. It's from your civilization, isn't it? Galoric considered the appropriate protocol response, but found established guidelines inadequate for this unprecedented situation. Yes, he acknowledged. This appears to be a Prontilex research facility dating to a historical period long before our records indicated contact with Earth. Michael absorbed this information with remarkable composure. So your people have been here before? Does that explain why you're studying us now? Negative, Galoric replied truthfully. Our current expedition was planned with no knowledge of previous contact. This discovery is unexpected. The entrance to the facility had been designed for Prontilex physiology, with proportions that would accommodate their environmental suits. After establishing safety parameters, Galoric made the decision to proceed with preliminary interior investigation. Michael, your assistance would be valuable, but the potential hazards of an ancient facility may exceed acceptable risk parameters for human physiology, Galoric stated. The human's response was immediate and definitive. I'm coming with you. If there's a 7,000-year-old alien base on my planet, I think I have a right to see what's inside it. The logic was difficult to refute. Galoric designated Tizir and Vitok to remain outside maintaining communications, while he, Katol, and Michael entered the structure. The interior illuminated automatically as they crossed the threshold, ancient systems responding to Prontilex biosignatures after millennia of dormancy. Corridors and chambers followed the familiar organizational logic of Imperial-era scientific outposts, though adapted to the environmental constraints of the mountain location. The facility appears to have been a long-term research installation, Katol observed, examining control interfaces that responded sluggishly to activation attempts. Data storage systems remain partially intact. Michael moved through the space with cautious fascination, careful not to touch equipment, but observing everything with intense concentration. What were they studying, he asked. Why set up a research base on Earth? Galoric was attempting to access the facility's central data repository when Katol's voice came with uncharacteristic urgency. Lead researcher, I have accessed visual records. You must examine these immediately. The display activated to show imagery that Galoric initially struggled to contextualize. The recordings showed Prontilex researchers in environmental suits similar to their own, but with significant technological differences reflecting their historical period. These researchers were conducting what appeared to be field studies of Earth's environment. But what seized Galoric's attention were the subjects of these studies. Early humans, anatomically similar to modern specimens, but with cultural patterns indicating pre-technological development, were being observed in various environmental interactions. They were studying human ancestors, Michael stated, watching the recordings with evident fascination. Just like you're studying us now. Not just studying, Katol corrected as additional data files opened. These records indicate a comprehensive colonization assessment. Earth was being evaluated as a potential Prontilex expansion world. This revelation stunned Galoric. Earth, a Class 4 death world by modern standards, had been considered suitable for colonization? It contradicted everything he understood about his species' environmental requirements. The facility's data became increasingly clear as ancient systems continued their reactivation sequence. What emerged was a historical narrative that had been entirely absent from Prontilex's scientific archives. 7,000 years ago, during the Third Expansion era, the Prontilex Empire had identified Earth as a potential colony world. Initial surveys had indicated challenging but manageable conditions. A research team had established this facility to conduct a comprehensive habitability assessment. The environmental parameters were different, Cattol noted, examining climate data. Earth was experiencing what humans would later call the Holocene climatic optimum, conditions significantly more moderate than current patterns. The research team had spent years studying Earth's ecosystems, with particular focus on the developing human species. Their records indicated initial dismissal of these primitive bipeds as an unremarkable omnivorous mammal unlikely to achieve significant ecological impact. Then came the project's abrupt termination. Climate system records showed a sudden shift, a cooling period accompanied by increased precipitation that fundamentally altered the regional ecosystem. But more significantly, the final research entries documented an unforeseen development: pathogens. The colonization project was abandoned due to microbial compatibility issues, Cattol translated from the ancient data files. Earth's microbiome proved fundamentally hostile to Prontilex biology, with multiple researchers succumbing to infections despite isolation protocols. The final entries contained a formal imperial classification that sent a chill through Galork's primary nervous system. Earth had been designated a Class 4 death world, a planet fundamentally incompatible with Prontilex physiology due to biosphere hostility. The facility had been placed in hibernation mode rather than dismantled, both as a warning marker and to preserve research data. Michael had been watching silently, his expression shifting as he processed the implications. So your ancestors tried to colonize Earth, but our germs stopped them. And they were watching my ancestors when they made this decision. The designation of Earth as a death world came directly from this expedition's findings, Galork confirmed, knowledge that had been lost to our historical records until now. Michael's response was unexpected, a laugh that contained complex emotional harmonics beyond Galork's translator capabilities. So humans aren't just current Deathworlders. We're the original reason for the classification in the first place. That's poetic somehow. As they continued exploring the facility, additional records revealed the final assessment of humanity by those ancient researchers. The Prontilex scientists had recognized something that their modern counterparts were rediscovering. Humans possessed unique adaptability that allowed them to thrive in conditions that would kill most sentient species. The final research entry, recorded by the expedition's lead scientist, contained an astounding prediction. The bipedal mammals show remarkable environmental tolerance and adaptive capacity. Despite their current primitive technology, their resistance to microbial threats that prove fatal to our physiology suggests potential for significant evolutionary advancement. Should they develop higher intelligence, their inherent compatibility with this hostile biosphere could make them formidable entities in the galactic context. Michael stood silently after this translation, his expression unreadable to Galork's cultural interpretation protocols. Finally, the human spoke with unexpected gentleness. They were right about us, weren't they? That's why you're here now, to study the formidable entities they predicted we might become. Galork found himself experiencing an emotion that transcended scientific objectivity, something approaching respect, perhaps even admiration. Yes, he acknowledged, humanity's development of advanced technology, while remaining adapted to death-world conditions, represents an evolutionary pathway without precedent in our xenobiological models. As they prepared to exit the facility with their collected data, Michael paused at the entrance, looking back at the ancient research station. 7,000 years, he mused. Your people were watching mine when we were just figuring out agriculture. And now you're back to find we've built cities and technologies while still being able to survive the planet that drove you away. He smiled, a genuine expression rather than the social signaling Galork had observed previously. No wonder you find us interesting. The return journey to their base camp proceeded with remarkable efficiency, as if the discovery had energized both the Prontilic scientists and their human guide. Michael navigated the challenging terrain with renewed confidence, occasionally pointing out features of Earth's ecosystem with what Galork now recognized as justified pride. See those plants growing back already after the storm? And there, those fungi breaking down the fallen trees? Everything here has evolved to not just survive disruption, but actually use it as an opportunity. Destruction becomes part of the creation cycle. Glork found himself viewing Earth's hostile environment through a transformed perspective. What had initially registered as chaotic danger now revealed itself as a complex system of challenges that had shaped humanity into what they were, a species that didn't merely endure adversity, but incorporated it into their development process. When they reached the base camp, the empirical discovery confirmed what Glork had already concluded. The expedition's parameters required fundamental revision. The discovery of the ancient Prontilex research station represented a historic find that would reshape understanding of both human development and their own species' history. As night fell and the scientists processed their data, Michael sat outside their camp, gazing at the star-filled sky. Glork joined him, his environmental suit adjusting to the dropping temperature. Your ancestors saw potential in mine, even 7,000 years ago, Michael observed without looking away from the stars. They understood something about us that maybe we're only now understanding about ourselves. The ancient researchers recognized human adaptability as an evolutionary advantage of extraordinary significance, Glork agreed. What they could not have anticipated was how quickly that potential would manifest. Michael nodded, finally turning to face the scientist. From stone tools to space exploration in the blink of an eye, evolutionarily speaking, all while carrying our Deathworld adaptations with us. He smiled again, with an expression Glork now recognized as containing both humor and perception. No wonder the galactic community keeps its distance. Not distance, Glork corrected. Caution, and now perhaps, re-evaluation. The human considered this, then asked the question Glork had been anticipating since their discovery. Will this change how your people interact with humans going forward? Knowing what you know now, Glork found himself facing a philosophical question beyond his scientific expertise. Yet the evidence they had uncovered demanded consideration of implications that transcended data collection. I believe it must, he finally replied. The discovery that our ancestors recognized human potential millennia ago, combined with our first-hand observation of your capabilities, suggests that traditional Deathworld classification protocols may be inadequate for your species. As Michael pondered this response, Glork added what diplomatic protocols would have classified as inappropriate speculation. Perhaps humans are not simply Deathworld survivors, but rather the embodiment of what adaptation truly means, the capacity to transform hostile conditions into evolutionary advantage. The humans smiled at this, a complex expression that Glork's cultural databases now interpreted as containing appreciation, pride, and something like fellowship. I think I'll take that as a compliment. It was intended as objective observation, Glork replied, but your interpretation is not incorrect. As Earth's rotation carried them into darkness, human and alien sat in companionable silence, each contemplating a shared history neither had known existed until today, and the implications it held for their shared future among the stars. The Prontilix delegation stood in formal arrangement beside their transport vessel, environmental suits gleaming in the morning sunlight. After 2 standard weeks of extended research following the discovery of the ancient facility, the expedition had reached its scheduled conclusion. The empirical discovery maintained orbit above, prepared for their return and the journey home with findings that would transform xenoscientific understanding. Michael Tanaka approached the gathering, dressed in what Glork had learned was professional attire rather than his usual wilderness gear, an apparent human custom for formal farewells. The transformation was notable. Without his functional outdoor equipment, the human projected a different social presence while remaining unmistakably the same resilient organism. So, heading back to the stars, Michael greeted them, his voice carrying what Glork's translator now accurately identified as mixed emotions. Professional satisfaction combined with personal regret at their departure. Our expedition has concluded with unprecedented success, Glork replied, attempting to incorporate the conversational patterns he had observed in human interactions. Your assistance proved essential to our research objectives. Michael smiled at the formal phrasing. After 2 weeks of intensive interaction, Glork recognized this expression as indication of genuine amusement rather than mere social signaling. Happy to help advance interstellar science, the human replied, though I'm still processing everything we discovered. Hard to believe your people were studying mine when we were just figuring out farming. The simplicity of this statement belied its profound implications that had occupied Glork's analytical processes extensively since their discovery. The ancient Prontolex expedition had inadvertently documented a crucial moment in human development, observing the transition from nomadic to agricultural society patterns. Those ancient scientists could not have anticipated how rapidly that transition would accelerate human technological advancement. The historical significance extends beyond even our initial assessment, Tazir added, her voice modulator adjusted to convey appropriate formality. Correlation of biological samples from the ancient facility with modern human genomic structure indicates significant adaptive evolution within a remarkably compressed timeframe. Michael nodded, though Glork detected the slight facial adjustments that indicated the human was simplifying complex scientific concepts into personally meaningful patterns. We changed to fit our world, and we changed our world to fit us, Michael summarized, and somehow ended up with the worst allergies in the galaxy, but the best immune systems. This characteristically human combination of scientific insight and self-deprecating humor had initially confused Glork. Now he recognized it as a sophisticated cognitive technique that balanced objective analysis with emotional processing. Another adaptation to high-stress existence. Your species' biological resilience remains the most significant anomaly in our xenoscientific database, Glork confirmed. The discovery that this resilience directly contributed to the failure of ancient colonization efforts provides crucial contextual understanding. Commander Palath's voice interrupted through their communication systems. Atmospheric conditions optimal for departure. Temporal window for optimal trajectory closes in 12 standard units. Michael recognized the significance of this message without translation. Looks like it's time for you to go. I guess even advanced alien scientists have to worry about launch windows. Physical constants remain consistent across civilizations, Cotole observed with what Glork recognized as attempted humor, a notable development in Prontolex human communication protocols. As the scientists began their final preparation sequence, Michael approached Glork directly, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture they had originally documented but now understood as signifying mutual respect. It's been educational, the human said, his voice carrying emotional harmonics that transcended simple translation. For both of us, I think. Glork extended his upper appendage, carefully modulating pressure to accommodate human physiological limitations while completing the ritualistic contact. Indeed, our understanding of human adaptability has been fundamentally transformed by direct observation. Glork paused, then added what would have been considered a protocol violation before this expedition, as has our understanding of ourselves. Michael's expression registered surprise followed by appreciation. That might be the most human thing I've heard you say. After a moment's consideration, he asked, "What happens now? With everything we discovered about your ancestors and their classification of Earth?" This question addressed implications that extended far beyond Glork's scientific mandate, yet demanded acknowledgement. The discovery that Earth's classification as a death world stemmed directly from early Prontolex colonization failure represented a paradigm shift in interspecies understanding. The galactic concord will require comprehensive reassessment of human classification, Glork stated, aware of the significant understatement this represented. Your species' ability to thrive in conditions that prove fatal to ancient Prontolex colonists suggests adaptive capabilities of unprecedented evolutionary significance. Michael nodded slowly, processing these implications. In other words, the fact that we find Earth comfortable while you need environmental suits just to visit makes us pretty special in the galactic community. Your characterization simplifies complex xenobiological principles, Galork replied, but is not inaccurate. The human laughed. That distinctive vocalization that had initially triggered Glork's threat assessment subroutines, but now registered as a positive social indicator. I'll take that as scientific approval of my layman's terms. As final departure preparations concluded, Michael stepped back to a respectful distance. The Prontolex scientists arranged themselves in departure formation, but Glork found himself experiencing an unprecedented impulse to offer additional closure to their interaction. Michael Tanaka, he began formally, your assistance during crisis conditions demonstrated capabilities that transcend our previous understanding of human adaptability. The storm navigation, predator confrontation, and facility exploration provided empirical evidence of qualities previously documented only in theoretical models. The human appeared momentarily uncomfortable with this formal acknowledgement. Another fascinating psychological adaptation that moderated individual recognition within social structures. Just doing my job, Michael replied with that characteristic minimization of achievement. Then more seriously, though I have to admit, finding out your ancestors tried to colonize Earth and got driven away by our germs puts a whole new perspective on human history. The historical significance extends beyond mere biological incompatibility, Galork observed. The ancient researchers' final assessment predicted humanity's potential with remarkable accuracy. They recognized that your species' adaptation to Earth's hostile conditions represented evolutionary advantages that might someday translate to significant capabilities. Michael considered this with evident interest. They saw something in us even when we were just starting to build civilizations. Something worth documenting and preserving information about, even as they classified our planet as too dangerous for their people. Precisely, Glork confirmed, and that assessment has been validated by humanity's subsequent development. You have achieved technological advancement comparable to spacefaring civilizations, while maintaining biological adaptations that allow survival in conditions lethal to most sentient species. The transport vessel's systems initiated pre-launch sequences, the subtle harmonic vibrations detectable even through Galork's environmental suit. Their departure window was narrowing. I hope this means we'll be seeing more of your people in the future, Michael said, clearly recognizing their time was concluding, under better circumstances than emergency storm shelters and mountain lion encounters. Glork considered the diplomatic implications before responding. The Concord's protocols regarding Deathworld civilizations will require revision based on our findings. Direct interaction will likely increase, though with continued biological precautions. What Galork couldn't articulate within his authority parameters, was how profoundly this expedition would transform galactic perception of humanity. The discovery that humans had essentially inherited Earth because other species couldn't survive its hostile conditions positioned them not as biological curiosities but as evolutionary specialists with capabilities no other known species possessed. We will return, Galork stated with uncharacteristic directness. Our research has only begun to document human adaptability. The implications extend beyond scientific interest to potential collaborative opportunities. Michael's expression registered understanding beyond the literal statement, another human perceptual ability that defied simple explanation. You're saying we might have something to offer the galactic community, despite being Deathworld barbarians. Classification terminologies aside, Galork replied, your species' ability to thrive in hostile conditions represents specialized evolutionary adaptation with numerous potential applications. The microbial resistance that defeated ancient colonization efforts alone suggests medical research opportunities of significant importance. The human nodded, his expression shifting to what Galork now recognized as thoughtful consideration rather than simple acknowledgement. Our weaknesses turned out to be our strengths in the long run. There's something profoundly human about that concept. Final departure signals activated, indicating immediate boarding requirement. Galork activated the formal conclusion protocol his expedition had prepared. Michael Tanaka, in recognition of your contributions to interspecies scientific advancement, the Prontolex Science Academy extends formal acknowledgement. Galork presented a small device, a data storage module containing non-classified information about galactic civilizations, translated into human language. This represents the beginning of information exchange rather than mere observation. The human accepted the device with evident appreciation of its significance. "Thank you. I'll make sure this gets to the right people." After a moment's hesitation, he added, "Tell your people that humans would welcome more visitors, even if you do think our planet is trying to kill you." An objectively accurate assessment, Glork noted, allowing his voice modulator to convey what humans would recognize as humor. As the Prontylix scientists boarded their transport vessel, Glork took a final moment to observe the humans standing against the backdrop of Earth's wilderness. The juxtaposition crystallized everything their expedition had discovered. Here stood a species perfectly adapted to conditions that had defeated a spacefaring civilization's colonization attempt. Not through technological shields or environmental manipulation, but through inherent biological resilience evolved over millions of years on a world that never stopped presenting new challenges. The transport vessel sealed, environmental systems transitioning to space protocols. Through the viewpoint, Glork observed Michael raise his hand in the human farewell gesture as the engines initiated launch sequence. As they ascended toward rendezvous with the empirical discovery, Glork composed the formal expedition summary that would accompany their research data to the Galactic Concord. After careful consideration of appropriate scientific terminology, he included a conclusion that would transform galactic understanding of humanity. Earth's classification as a Class 4 death world originated not from objective environmental assessment, but from specific biological incompatibility with Prontylix physiology. The indigenous intelligent species, humans, represents not merely an anomaly of evolution, but rather specialized adaptation perfected through continuous environmental challenge. Their biological resilience, combined with their accelerated technological development, positions humanity not as primitive deathworlders, but as specialized evolutionary success cases whose capabilities complement rather than replicate those of existing galactic civilizations. Recommended reclassification: Earth to remain designated Class 4 death world for non-human biological entities, but humanity to be recognized as specialized environmental adaptation species with potential contributory status in Galactic Concord scientific exchange protocols. In essence, we did not discover primitive organisms surviving against impossible odds, but rather witnessed the outcome of evolutionary processes that transformed hostile conditions into specialized advantage. Humans are not simply surviving their death world, they are its intended inheritors, shaped by its challenges into something unique in our galactic understanding. As the transport vessel achieved orbit and approached docking with the empirical discovery, Glork allowed himself a final observation that transcended pure scientific documentation. When the ancient Prontylix attempted colonization and were defeated by Earth's hostile biosphere, they inadvertently created the conditions for humanity's uncontested development. We classified their world as lethal and abandoned it to them. 7,000 years later, we return to find they have not merely survived but thrived, developing in isolation adaptations and perspectives that may prove invaluable to galactic civilization precisely because they evolved in conditions no other sentient species could endure. The death world did not defeat humanity, it created them. The transport completed docking procedures, artificial gravity transitioning smoothly as they prepared for interstellar departure. Glork sealed his report with the formal verification code of the Prontylix Science Academy, knowing that its contents would initiate a fundamental reassessment of humanity's place in galactic understanding. Below them, Earth continued its serene rotation, a stunningly beautiful world that happened to be lethal to most spacefaring species, but perfect for the humans who called it home. A world that had shaped its dominant species through relentless challenge, producing organisms uniquely suited to transform adversity into advantage. A death world only to those who hadn't evolved to inherit it,